In the village of Whittingham, on Halfpenny Lane, there is a house older than the rest. Embedded in its wall is a gigantic rib from the giant dun cow that used to roam the moors around Parlick and Bleasdale. She came each evening to drink at the spring known as Nick's Water Pot. People from the village would creep over the hill to watch her. She was larger than an elephant. If any of the villagers were in need, they would bring a pail or a jug and edge forward. The velvet-coated cow would walk gently towards them, lower her soft black nose to greet them, and turn sideways so that they could reach to milk her. The villagers knew that she would only fill one vessel each. If someone was greedy and tried to have two, she swished her tail. If they carried on, she stamped her feet. If they still didn't stop, she aimed a perfect kick and sent them and their milk flying. Then she ran away, disappearing into the mists and the night. One evening, as the nights were getting long and an icy chill licked the air, an elderly woman sat at the window of her cottage, bent over a flickering rush light. She peered out over the moors and scowled. She knew all about the dun cow and how those fallen on hard times could fill their pails. How dare it take away her business? At such times people came to her. They were her livelihood. A spell here, a talisman there, and the outcome was always the same. When it worked, they were enthralled to her. And she knew what this meant. All could be turned to fear, and that fear gave her power. She stared back at the tiny light, and slowly she began to smile. Yes, she knew what to do. The next night, the old woman pulled on a warm blanket around her shoulders and covered it with her oldest threadbare cloak. She then took her largest sieve, hid it underneath the blanket, and left the house. When she reached Parlick Fell, a straggle of villagers were heading out for Nick's water pot. She fell behind them and followed them from a distance. Over the brow, she caught sight of the cow and smiled to herself. Hiding behind a huge boulder, she waited and watched. The dun cow allowed an old lady, a young father, and 2 young girls to milk her. As soon as the last villagers had passed the boulder on their way home, the old woman moved as swiftly as she could, but as she approached the beast, she shuffled slowly, limping and groaning. Hearing her, the dun cow met her halfway. She held out her arm. It shifted itself sideways and let her settle to milking. Under a curtain of rags, she slid the sieve underneath its udders and began to milk. She watched with satisfaction as the milk flowed straight through the sieve and onto the earth below. At first the cow was docile, but as the moon rose in the sky she became restless, swishing her tail. Still the cunning old woman carried on until she had milked her dry. The beautiful great beast turned its head and stared at the milky rivulets pouring down the fellside, glistening in the moonlight. She looked mournfully at the old woman, who stood back, held up her sieve for the dun cow to see, and laughed. The following week, the young father found the poor beast on the other side of the fell. She was lying as though asleep, but her soft, wet nose was dry and cold.